The Kite Runner, Introduction. I became what I am today at the age of 12. That's how it all begins. That single sentence carries the weight of the entire story, my story. It was a cold winter day in 1975 in Kabul, when everything changed. I remember the way the sky looked, the way the snow crunched under my boots, and the way my life split into a before and after. This is a story of friendship, betrayal, and the long path toward redemption. But more than anything, it's a story of memory, a haunting, persistent memory that refuses to fade. Sometimes we bury the past because it's too painful, but the truth is, the past claws its way out. And when it does, we are faced with choices that define who we truly are. I, Amir, grew up in a rich house in Kabul, the son of a proud and respected man, Baba. He was larger than life, full of strength and honor, a man who built orphanages and stood up to injustice. I always wanted to be like him, but I often felt I wasn't enough. I was a boy who wrote poetry, read stories, and longed for his father's approval. Then there was Hassan, my best friend, my servant, my brother in all but name. He was the son of our Hazara servant, Ali. Hassan had a cleft lip, a wide smile, and the purest heart I have ever known. We were boys who flew kites together, raced through the alleys of Kabul, and dreamed dreams far bigger than ourselves. Hassan would do anything for me. And I failed him. In the winter of 1975, something terrible happened. I saw something I wasn't supposed to see. I stood there and did nothing. And that silence, the weight of it, has followed me through every chapter of my life. That day I betrayed Hassan. And I've been trying to redeem myself ever since. This book is not just about Afghanistan, though its history runs through every line. It's about fathers and sons. It's about loyalty and cowardice. It's about the terrible cost of secrets. Through every page, I want you to feel the dusty streets of Kabul, the quiet sadness of a lost homeland, the laughter of two boys chasing a blue kite, and the cold silence of betrayal. But I also want you to see hope. Because as Rahim Khan, my father's old friend, once said, there is a way to be good again. That's what this journey is about. It's about finding that way, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. This is the Kite Runner. And it all starts with a phone call, 26 years after that fateful day, when the past came calling. Chapter 1. The Call from the Past. I remember the way the sunlight filtered through the trees in San Francisco when Rahim Khan called me. 26 years had passed, but his voice carried the weight of a truth I couldn't run from. There is a way to be good again, he said. And just like that, I was pulled back to Kabul. The past doesn't let go, not really. It waits in the quiet corners of your soul, ready to rise with the sound of a single voice. I walked through Golden Gate Park that day, thinking of a winter long ago, in 1975. Thinking of kites. Thinking of Hassan. The way he ran, his voice echoing behind him. For you 1,000 times over. That voice never left me. I had buried it, deep beneath the surface of my new American life. But it was always there, whispering. Now it was time to go back. To make amends. To find the path to redemption. Chapter 1 doesn't offer answers. It offers a doorway. A moment where memory and present collide. It's the whisper before the storm. The shadow before the sun rises on a long-buried truth. Chapter 2. The Two Boys in Kabul. I grew up in Kabul, in a house of sun-drenched walls and garden fountains. It was a good life, at least on the surface. Baba, my father, was a man of strength, charisma, and conviction. I wanted so badly to be like him, but I often felt like I wasn't enough. I didn't play sports. I liked books. I wrote stories. And in Baba's world, those things weren't exactly badges of honor. Then there was Hassan. He lived in a mud hut on the edge of our property with his father, Ali. They were Hazaras, an ethnic minority, often looked down on by others. But to me, Hassan was more than a servant's son. He was my friend. My first memory is of him standing behind a mud wall, shielding me with his slingshot, shouting at bullies to leave me alone. Hassan had a cleft lip, which made his smile crooked, but to me, it made him unique. He never read a book, but he always knew the right thing to say. I'd read him stories under the pomegranate tree, and he'd listen like they were treasures. There's a purity to childhood friendship, a kind of love that doesn't know boundaries. But even then there were divisions. I was a Pashtun. He was a Hazara. I lived in a mansion. He lived in a servant's quarters. Even as children, the lines were drawn, quiet, unspoken, but sharp. Looking back, I wonder how much of our friendship was real, and how much was built on that invisible power dynamic. But when we ran through the streets of Kabul, chasing kites or playing with slingshots, none of that mattered. We were just two boys. And yet, even then, the seeds of guilt were beginning to grow. Chapter 3, Baba and Me. Baba was a force. The kind of man who defied the world and expected you to do the same. He built orphanages with his bare hands, stood up to corrupt officials, and hunted black bears in Baluchistan. People admired him. I worshipped him, but I didn't understand him. He looked at me, skinny, shy, a storyteller, and saw a stranger. I once overheard him say to Rahim Khan, "If I hadn't seen the doctor pull him out of his mother, I'd never believe he's my son." That shattered me. I wanted so badly for him to see me, to accept me, to be proud. There was one thing Baba always believed in: honor. He hated lies. To him, a single lie was the root of all evil. When you tell a lie, you steal someone's right to the truth, he said. He believed that with all his heart. And yet, I had begun to live in lies, small ones at first, but growing. Rahim Khan, on the other hand, understood me. He read my short story and told me it was good. No one had ever said that before. That moment, small as it was, planted a seed of belief in me. Maybe I wasn't like Baba, but maybe I had something of value too. Baba and I were two people living in the same house but worlds apart. He wanted a son who was brave, bold, athletic. I was a boy who hid behind books. The more I tried to win his love, the more I seemed to fall short. But deep down, I kept hoping that one day I'd make him proud. Chapter 4, Stories and the Unspoken Divide. It was in the shade of the pomegranate tree that I first read a story I had written. Hassan sat with his chin tucked into his knees, listening as if each word were a priceless jewel. He couldn't read or write, but he understood stories, truly understood them. That was the kind of person he was. His mind, though untrained, was instinctively wise. The story was about a man who cried pearls, and I remember how Hassan's eyes lit up as I read it. He loved it, said it was the best story he'd ever heard. That moment should have made me happy, but instead I felt jealous. Jealous of his ability to understand things I barely grasped myself. Jealous that Baba might have loved him more, if only he were his son. The thought stung, and yet it wasn't new. Sometimes I tested Hassan. I would use big words to see if he understood. He usually did. And if he didn't, he asked. Never with shame, just quiet curiosity. But each time, a part of me felt superior. That difference between us, the one born of class and culture and blood, it hung in the air even when we laughed together. Especially then. We were friends, yes. But we were also something else. Something uneven. I was his master's son. And Hassan, though he never said it, never showed it, knew his place. That was the nature of things in Kabul. Some people were born with servants. Others were born to be them. Chapter 5, Broken Smiles and Fire in the Sky. The day the sky broke with gunfire, Hassan and I were lying under his favorite tree. We thought it was an earthquake at first, but it was the sound of Afghanistan beginning to unravel. That was the day Daud Khan overthrew the king, something that meant little to two boys in the alley, but everything to the world outside it. When things calmed down, Hassan and I went to a fortune teller in the marketplace. The man held Hassan's palm and read it slowly. Then, without a word, he dropped it. Wouldn't speak. That silence chilled me more than the sound of gunfire had. As if he'd seen something in Hassan's future that he didn't want to say aloud. Later that year, Baba paid to have Hassan's cleft lip repaired as a birthday gift. A surgeon cut the skin and stitched it straight. "It's the happiest day of my life," Hassan said, his voice filled with innocence. But for me, it felt like something deeper had changed. The smile that used to be a symbol of Hassan's loyalty and love, crooked, imperfect, was now straight. But the world around us was becoming more twisted, as if fate was playing a cruel joke. Even then, I felt a storm was coming, and deep in my heart, I knew I would fail him when it mattered most. Chapter 6, The Winter Tradition. Winter in Kabul was magical. The streets turned white, children made snowmen, and we all prepared for the biggest event of the year, the kite fighting tournament. For boys like me, it was more than a game. It was a chance to shine, to be seen, to matter. Every year, I entered the tournament, dreaming of winning Baba's admiration. The rules were simple. Cut your opponent's string, and the last kite flying was the victor. But what really mattered was the last cut kite, the one everyone chased across rooftops and alleys. That kite was the prize, the trophy, the glory. Hassan was the best kite runner in Kabul. He could predict exactly where a kite would fall, long before it did. "There it is, Amir Aga," he'd whisper. "The last one." His loyalty wasn't just spoken, it was shown time and time again. That winter, I felt something stirring. This was my chance. If I won, maybe Baba would finally see me. Not the disappointment, but the son he always wanted. Hassan promised he'd bring back the last kite. "For you, 1,000 times over," he said. Those words, they still echo in my mind. Because they weren't just a promise, they were a prophecy. Chapter 7, The Kite and the Silence. I won the tournament. The last blue kite danced across the sky, and I heard the roar of Baba's pride echo from the crowd. For the first time, I felt what it was like to be enough. Baba held me that night like he had never done before. But then came the part of the story I can never escape. Hassan chased after the last kite like he promised. I followed him into an alley, and then stopped. I saw something terrible, something evil. 3 boys. One of them, Asef, cornered Hassan. And I did nothing. I watched. Frozen. Afraid. Cowardly. I could have spoken. I could have stepped in. But I didn't. That moment, those minutes, would shape everything that followed. I told myself it was too late, that he wouldn't want me to interfere. But I knew the truth. I was afraid. And Hassan paid the price for my fear. When he returned with the kite, blood on his pants, eyes hollow, he said nothing. Just handed it to me. That kite, my glory, was bought with his pain. I had the prize, but I had lost something greater, my honor, my soul, my friend. Chapter 8, The Wall Between Us. After that day, nothing was the same. I avoided Hassan, avoided the pomegranate tree, avoided my own reflection. Guilt is a strange thing. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it sits quietly inside you, eating you from the inside. Hassan tried to reach out. He asked if I wanted to go to the hill to play. I told him to stop bothering me. I told him to leave me alone. I said cruel things, things I didn't mean, just to push him away. Because every time I looked at him, I saw my failure. Even Baba noticed my change. He tried to take me out, spend time with me, but I was too caught in my own storm. When we went to Jalalabad, I got carsick. I threw up in the car. Everyone thought it was from the ride. But I knew it was the guilt. The worst part? Hassan never brought it up. He never accused me. Never even looked at me with anger. That silence was louder than any scream. It told me I had failed someone who would have given his life for me. And so I built a wall between us. Not because I didn't love Hassan, but because I couldn't bear the weight of his love for me. Chapter 9, A Lie Between Brothers. Guilt, when left unchecked, becomes a fire that burns everything in its path. After Hassan's assault, I couldn't look him in the eyes. His silence, his loyalty, only made the guilt worse. And so I did something unforgivable. It was New Year's Day when I decided to make Hassan go away for good. I took my birthday gifts, things I didn't even want, and hid my watch and some money under Hassan's mattress. Then I told Baba they were missing. It was a lie, a cruel, cowardly lie. One that I hoped would push Hassan away and give me some kind of relief. But that relief never came. Ali and Hassan were called into the living room. Baba asked them if they had taken the money and the watch. Hassan looked him in the eyes and said, "Yes." He lied for me. One last time. I realized then what true loyalty looked like. It wasn't in words. It wasn't in the stories we told each other. It was in the way Hassan stood there, shouldering the shame that was mine to bear. He knew I was lying, but he chose silence again, chose me, over his own dignity. When Ali said they were leaving, Baba cried. I had never seen him cry. He begged them to stay. But Ali, always a man of quiet honor, said they could no longer live there. And so, just like that, they were gone. My guilt didn't go away. It only grew heavier. I had won Baba's pride, but lost my only true friend. And for the first time, I saw the weight of my choices. Some betrayals never leave you. They shape who you become. Chapter 10, Escape from Kabul. By 1981, Kabul was no longer the city of our childhood. Soviet tanks rolled through the streets. Soldiers carried rifles like shadows. The air, once filled with the scent of naan and the laughter of kite chases, now smelled of fear. Baba and I became refugees. We packed what little we could and joined others in the dead of night, crammed in the back of a truck headed for Jalalabad. Baba, once the lion of Kabul, now sat quietly among strangers, holding onto a bag of clothes and a crumbling past. The journey was long and brutal. We hid in basements, bribed border guards, and held our breath at checkpoints. At one stop, a Russian soldier demanded time alone with a woman in our group. Baba stood up, fists clenched, refusing. "Tell him I'll take 1,000 bullets before I let him touch her," he roared. That was Baba. His honor was not for sale, even in exile. We made it to Pakistan eventually. But something in Baba changed. The man who once built orphanages now sold gas at a station in Fremont. And I began my life in America carrying books in a paper bag and broken dreams in my chest. Chapter 11, Fremont, California. In Fremont, California, we were no longer powerful. We were immigrants. Baba worked long hours at a gas station. I graduated from high school. We sold items at a flea market every weekend. The man who once entertained diplomats now bartered over old carpets with Afghan housewives. But even in this strange land, Baba kept his pride. He refused food stamps, refused pity. To him, dignity was the only thing he had left. Sometimes, I'd see him staring off in the distance. Not just homesick, but soul-sick. Kabul lived in his bones, and here, he was just another man growing old. That year, I told him I wanted to study creative writing. It felt like a betrayal. Baba wanted a doctor, an engineer, not a storyteller. But he nodded, gritted his teeth, and said, "Fine." He didn't understand, but he gave me his blessing. That was his way of loving me, silently, reluctantly, but fully. It was during this time that I first saw Soraya, a beautiful Afghan girl with chestnut hair and a quiet sadness in her eyes. I knew then something had shifted. Our story was far from over. Chapter 12, Soraya and the Silence Between Us. Soraya Taheri. She was more than just the general's daughter. She was kind, intelligent, and bold in a way Afghan girls rarely were. She read books. She loved teaching. And when we spoke, it felt like I could breathe again. I would watch her from my bookstall at the flea market, waiting for moments to talk. Slowly, carefully, I began to know her. Her laugh, her worries, her dreams. One day, she told me about a mistake she had made, running away with a boy when she was younger. Her voice trembled, but her eyes stayed strong. That confession taught me something. Courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's found in the quiet act of telling your truth. When I asked Baba to propose to her father, he resisted. Not because he didn't approve, but because he feared what people might say about her past. But I reminded him of Hassan, of loyalty, of forgiveness. And eventually he agreed. That summer, Baba was diagnosed with cancer. He hid it at first, unwilling to appear weak. But his body, unlike his pride, couldn't fight forever. Still, he insisted on doing everything the Afghan way. No shortcuts. No pity. He paid for the wedding himself. He stood tall, even as his body betrayed him. And when Soraya and I were married, he gave me one last gift, his blessing. That night, he told me he was proud. Those words, simple, precious, were all I ever wanted. Chapter 13, A Love and Loss. Marriage to Soraya brought a peace I had never known. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was running. We set up our life together, shared stories, made plans. But happiness has a way of showing you what you still carry inside. We tried to have a child. For months. Then years. But nothing. Tests showed no clear reason. Doctors called it unexplained infertility, a phrase that only deepened the ache. Soraya cried quietly at night. I tried to console her, but even in our love, there was a silence neither of us could fill. Meanwhile, Baba's illness grew worse. His once powerful frame became frail. But he never complained. He taught me what it meant to die with grace. When he finally passed, we buried him beside a small mosque, with the call to prayer echoing in the California sky. I had lost the man I spent my life trying to please. And yet, in those final days, I think he saw me, not who he wished I had been, but who I truly was. Still, something was missing. A part of me buried in Kabul still called out. A chapter left unfinished. And I didn't know it yet, but soon, that unfinished story would return. In the form of a phone call. A chance to be good again. Chapter 14. A phone call from the past. It had been over 20 years since I left Kabul, yet the past has a way of reaching through time, untouched by distance. It was on a rainy afternoon in San Francisco when the phone rang. Rahim Khan was calling from Pakistan. His voice sounded older, thinner, but it carried something heavier, memory. "There is a way to be good again," he said. Those words struck me like a stone to the chest. I hadn't heard them since that winter day in 1975, when my betrayal became permanent. I tried to live a new life. I taught English, wrote stories, loved Soraya. But inside, I was still that boy who had watched his friends suffer and done nothing. Rahim Khan asked me to come to Peshawar. He said he was dying. And though he didn't say it, I knew he wanted something more than a visit. He was calling me not as a friend, but as a witness to my guilt. My first instinct was to say no. But guilt is a persistent echo. It doesn't fade. It follows you, tapping you on the shoulder when you think you've forgotten. That night, I walked the streets, feeling Kabul in every shadow. I saw Hassan smile, heard his voice, remembered the alley. Soraya saw something was bothering me. I told her the truth, or most of it, enough to say I had to go. The past, I realized, doesn't go anywhere. It waits. And sometimes it calls. Chapter 15, Return to Rahim Khan. Peshawar was both familiar and foreign. The dust still clung to the air, but the streets felt heavier, burdened by decades of war. I met Rahim Khan in a small apartment, tucked away from the city's noise. He was thinner than I remembered, a shadow of the man who once stood beside Baba. We talked about the old days, about Baba, Kabul, even the house on the hill. But beneath the surface, there was something unsaid, something waiting. Rahim told me he had lived in our house for years after we left. He watched the city fall apart, piece by piece, until even the pomegranate tree in the yard withered and died. He said it like it was more than a tree, as if it were the last memory of a time when we were still whole. Then he told me about Hassan. After we fled, Rahim found him in Hazarajat and brought him back to live in the house. Hassan had married. He had a son, Sorab. He cleaned the house, planted flowers, served Rahim with the same quiet loyalty he once gave me. But even in the way Rahim spoke, I could hear the sadness creeping in. "There is something else," he said. "Something you need to know." The weight in his eyes told me this wasn't just about redemption. It was about truth. And truths have teeth. They don't come quietly. Chapter 16, Hassan's story. Rahim Khan told me the story as if it were a confession. Hassan had returned to Kabul with his wife, Farzana, and they lived humbly in our old servants' quarters. He wrote letters to me, kind, thoughtful letters I never received. In them, he spoke of the past with love, not blame. Of his son, Sorab, and how the boy smiled like his mother. Of the Taliban, and how their rule had turned Kabul into a prison of fear. Despite it all, he remained faithful. Faithful to me. To Baba. To the very home where he was once wronged. Then Rahim told me the unthinkable. The Taliban had come to our house. Hassan, always loyal, refused to leave. He said the house was not his to give. For that, they shot him. Killed Farzana too. In the street. In front of their son. As Rahim spoke, I felt everything inside me collapse. Hassan had died protecting my father's house, the same house I had once tried to erase him from. But that wasn't all. "There's something you don't know," Rahim said quietly. "Hassan was your brother." The room tilted. My father, Baba, had betrayed us both. He had slept with Ali's wife. And Hassan was my half-brother. The boy I had betrayed, mocked, tested. He was my blood. I had spent my life trying to earn Baba's love, never knowing I had shared it with someone who deserved it far more. Chapter 17, The Letter. Rahim handed me a letter, written in Hassan's hand, dated months before his death. It was gentle, like everything Hassan ever did. In it, he wrote of Sorab, who loved books and soccer, of Kabul, now ruled by fear, of the pomegranate tree, which no longer bore fruit. He spoke of me with warmth, with a longing that was never bitter. He asked how I was, if I was happy, and he hoped I had found peace. That letter undid me. I had spent decades hating myself, imagining Hassan resented me. But he hadn't. He forgave me before I had even asked. That kind of grace, it broke me. Rahim then said something that left me breathless. "Sorab is in an orphanage in Kabul. I want you to bring him here. Take him away from that place." I wanted to scream. I hadn't come to adopt a child. I wasn't strong enough. But Rahim just looked at me, eyes tired but firm. You have to. It wasn't a request. It was a call to do the one thing I had never done, make it right. The journey ahead was dangerous. The Taliban were ruthless. The orphanage a nightmare. But I knew somewhere in my bones that I owed this child more than safety. I owed him a father. Chapter 18, Kabul again. I crossed the border back into Afghanistan the same way I had left it, through winding roads and armed checkpoints. But this time I wasn't fleeing. I was returning. Kabul lay ahead, scarred and hollow, like a broken shell of memory. Farid, my driver, was quiet. He had lost his brothers to war. He thought I was just another tourist in search of guilt. But as we drove through the ruins, past bombed-out buildings and lifeless markets, he began to understand. I had come for something more. I saw the city of my boyhood turn to ash. The streets I once ran through now swallowed by silence. The laughter, the color, the hope, all stripped away. Yet in that ruin, I felt something awaken. This was my city, my story, my reckoning. Farid took me to an orphanage, dusty, crumbling, overrun. The children looked older than their years. And Sorab, he wasn't there. The man who ran the orphanage said he had given Sorab to a Taliban official. They come for children, he whispered. I had no choice. My heart dropped. I had come so far. And now the boy, my nephew, was in the hands of the men who had murdered his parents. But Farid didn't hesitate. He looked at me, and for the first time his eyes softened. We will find him, he said. The journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. Chapter 19. A City of Ghosts. Returning to Kabul was like walking through a dream someone else had already forgotten. The city that once sang with laughter and street vendors now whispered in dust. The vibrant murals had faded. The kite strings no longer danced in the sky. Bomb craters pockmarked roads where I once chased kites with Hassan. It was a city of ghosts, and I was one of them. Farid, my driver and reluctant guide, watched me with suspicion. To him, I was a privileged Afghan who had run away. And he wasn't wrong. At first, he spoke little. His face was tight, his eyes always scanning. But when we visited his brother's home, a humble mud-walled shelter, I saw a different side of him. They welcomed me like family, despite their poverty. His children stared at me as if I were royalty. And when I offered them some money, one of the boys turned away in shame. It was then Farid said something I'd never forget. You've always been a tourist here. You just didn't know it. That night, I lay on a hard mattress, Hassan's letter in my pocket, the ghosts of my betrayal weighing heavier than ever. Kabul wasn't just broken by war. It was broken by silence, by things left unsaid, by children abandoned to the rubble of history. And I had come to claim one of them. Not for redemption, not for honor, but for love. The kind I never gave Hassan, and the kind I hoped, by some miracle, I could still give his son. Chapter 20. The Orphanage. The orphanage was nothing like I imagined. No soft beds. No walls decorated with children's drawings. Just a concrete shell filled with hungry eyes and broken voices. The director, Zaman, greeted us with caution and weariness. He had once been a teacher. Now he protected over 100 children with little more than a locked door and a tired soul. I asked about Sorab. He nodded slowly and said, "He's not here anymore." My chest tightened. The Taliban, Zaman explained, came monthly. They didn't take all the children, just the prettiest, the quietest. They said it was for special tasks, but everyone knew what that meant. They took Sorab a week ago. Farid exploded with rage, calling Zaman a traitor. But I saw something else in the man's eyes, guilt. Desperation. "What choice do I have?" he whispered. "Do I let them take 10 children instead of one?" That moment shattered something inside me. War doesn't just kill people. It kills choices. It makes monsters out of men who once told bedtime stories and graded homework. But he gave us a name. A man with a White House. A high-ranking Talib. That's who had Sorab. I knew then I would go. Alone if I had to. Because the past wasn't done with me yet. And neither was Hassan. Chapter 21. The House on the Hill. Before we faced the Talib, I asked Farid to take me to my old home. The house on the hill. It stood like a monument to memory, tall, empty, crumbling. The rose bushes were gone. The pomegranate tree was a skeleton of itself. The driveway where Hassan and I once played had weeds breaking through the cracks. But the blue kite still danced in my mind. I stepped into Baba's study. Dust coated the bookshelves. His leather chair sat stiff and silent. I remembered the smell of his pipe, the sound of his voice, the quiet tension between love and expectation. Then I went to the alley. The same alley where everything changed. I stood in that narrow passage, now filled with trash and silence, and closed my eyes. I saw Hassan again, his cap crooked, his kite clutched tightly, his voice trembling. For you 1,000 times over. There are places that hold pain. Places that remember what we try to forget. That alley remembered me. And I remembered who I needed to become. Chapter 22, The Monster's Den. We found him in a mansion that mocked Kabul's ruin. Golden chandeliers, marble floors, and at the center, a man in black robes, sunglasses over dead eyes. The Talib leader. He greeted me with a cold smile and offered tea. You came all the way from America to find a Hazara boy, he asked. There was something familiar in his voice, something that crawled up my spine like ice. And then he removed his glasses. It was Asef, the same boy who raped Hassan, the one who once beat me for speaking up. The sociopath with a Taliban badge. He laughed when I gasped. What are the odds, he said. Then he brought Sorab in. The boy looked like Hassan. Same sad eyes. Same quiet dignity. He stared at me without blinking, as if trying to see if I was real. Asef said I could take him, if I earned him. A fight. Just like when we were kids. But this time there were no kites. No medals. Only pain. He beat me until my ribs cracked. Until my eyes swelled shut. I fell again and again. But I didn't leave. Not this time. And then, like a whisper of the past, Sorab pulled out a slingshot, Hassan's slingshot. The same weapon that once protected us both. He aimed it at Asef's eye and said, Stop, or I'll shoot. He didn't stop. So Sorab did. Just like that, Asef fell, screaming, clutching his bleeding eye. The past for once fought back. And we escaped, me broken and bleeding. Sorab, silent and shaken. But alive. Chapter 23, The Long Road Back. I woke in a hospital in Peshawar. Bandaged. Bruised. But breathing. Fard was gone. Sorab sat quietly by my side, eyes hollow. The doctor said I was lucky to be alive. But luck had nothing to do with it. It was grace, Hassan's grace, passed down through his son. Rahim Khan had vanished. Left a letter behind, along with the deed to the house in Kabul. He said he wouldn't live to see the end of the story. But he had hoped, you will find a way to be good again. In his letter, he spoke of Baba, of how ashamed Baba had been. His generosity had been a kind of penance. And me, I was the final act. The one who could finish what Baba started. Not with strength, but with humility. Not with pride, but with love. Sorab didn't speak much. His trauma was carved too deep for words. But I told him stories. Of his father. Of the blue kite. Of California. He didn't smile. But he listened. And I knew this was just the beginning. Redemption doesn't come in grand gestures. It comes in sitting with someone's silence. In showing up every day, even when you don't know how. Even when you're afraid. Chapter 24, The Silence Between Us. We made it out of Pakistan with forged documents and unspoken prayers. The embassy official barely looked at us, just stamped the papers and sent us through. As if the bruises on my face and the vacancy in Sorab's eyes were just another line in the paperwork. In Islamabad, the hotel was clean and quiet. Too quiet. I tried to fill the space with anything. Television static, the hum of the mini-fridge, the rustle of newspapers. But nothing could drown out the silence between us. Sorab barely spoke. He answered questions with nods. Ate only when I insisted. At night, he curled into himself on the corner of the bed, as if afraid of his own body. He flinched when I reached out too quickly. He stared too long at the window, like he was waiting for something to come through it. Maybe a memory, maybe a ghost. I told him stories. About Hassan. About the pomegranate tree. About a boy who once flew a kite to win his father's heart. He listened, but never responded. One morning, I found the bathroom door locked. I knocked. No answer. I called his name. Nothing. My heart dropped. I kicked the door in. He lay in the bathtub, motionless. His wrists were open and leaking red into the water. His eyes were open, but far away, as if he'd already left. I screamed. Called the front desk. The ambulance. My voice shook the walls, but not him. At the hospital, The doctors said he had lost a lot of blood, but he would survive. Barely. Physically. Emotionally, they couldn't say. I sat beside him that night, watching machines breathe for him. I held his hand, even though he didn't hold back. And in that sterile white room, I whispered a promise, not out loud, but to whatever part of him could still hear. I won't leave you, no matter how quiet you get. Chapter 25, The Blue Kite. California smelled like oranges and old dreams. We returned quietly, without fanfare. Soraya met us at the airport, her arms open wide, her eyes brimming with relief and worry. She kissed Sorab's forehead. He didn't flinch, but he didn't look at her either. The guest room became his sanctuary. He kept the door closed most days. Slept with the light on. When he spoke, it was in monosyllables, if at all. Therapy didn't help. School was tolerated, not enjoyed. He made no friends. His eyes remained hollow, like windows to a house long abandoned. But we waited. Every day we showed up. Small gestures. Warm meals. Bedtime stories. I told him about the kites again. About the day Hassan ran for me one final time. I told him about Baba. About redemption. He listened. That was all he could give. Then one Sunday in March, I brought home a kite. It was blue with a yellow tail. The kind Hassan would have loved. I didn't say anything. Just took it to the park and started running. The wind was just strong enough. The kite caught, lifted, danced. I let out more string, and the sky held it like a secret. When I looked back, Sorab was watching. He stood, walked slowly toward me. I stopped and held out the spool. He took it, and something, maybe the wind, maybe grace, passed between us. He didn't speak, didn't smile, but his hands moved, guiding the kite, pulling it into loops like he'd been born knowing how. For a long time, we stood like that, not as father and son, not yet, but as something new, two people learning how to breathe again. A gust came, and the kite dove suddenly. Sorab yanked the string, and it soared again. He looked at me, and then, just barely, he smiled. Final note. There are stories we inherit, whether we ask for them or not. I inherited betrayal, guilt, silence, but also love, also redemption. It took a long time to understand that being good doesn't mean being perfect. It means showing up when it's hard. It means listening when there's nothing to hear. It means choosing, every day, to love someone who doesn't yet know how to be loved. Somewhere in Kabul, the pomegranate tree still stands. Maybe its fruit is bitter now. Maybe it's withered. But in my mind it's blooming. Carved with two names, mine and Hassan's, etched deep into its bark. And here in California, a boy is flying a blue kite. He holds the string gently, like it's the thread that ties him to a world he's not sure he trusts. But he holds it, and I run behind him, calling out softly, "For you 1,000 times over." This time I mean it. Thank you for listening.